There once was a ghost named Mary. Or wait a sec, wasn't it Larry? An EMF of 5 caused me to die. Man, this game's actually scary. Hey guys, James here with another review, this time talking about the big indie horror hit, Phasmophobia. Phasmophobia is a game developed by one man at Kinetic Games out of the Unity engine. It's a 4-player co-op ghost hunting game where you take on the role of paranormal investigators who get sent to various buildings to try and find, identify, and escape a potentially deadly ghost. If I had to compare this game to other games, I'd say it's slightly reminiscent of Dead by Daylight style games, but instead of having one player trying to kill the other 4, here you have 4 players trying to track down one AI-controlled ghost. In some ways, the game reminds me of an escape room, and I think of it more as a puzzle game than anything else. I think Phasmophobia really does capture that feeling you get from ghost hunting shows, but here, the ghosts actually exist. From a gameplay perspective, you and up to 3 others can go to various haunted sites. The sites are haunted by one ghost, which in each round you play might spawn with different characteristics, such as gender, age, what room they like to haunt, and how aggressive they might be. You and your crew use a variety of tools to try and track down the ghost. This includes using flashlights, EMF readers, thermometers, and various sensors. Then, when you think you found the ghost, you need to try and figure out what type of ghost it is. In order to do this, you need to try and interact with the ghost through various tools, such as a notebook for the ghost to write in, cameras to check for ghost orbs, a spirit box to communicate to the ghost, and more. Depending on the clues you get, you can then take a guess as to what type of ghost it is, and then you can also try and complete any other objectives the game might have assigned you. So with any horror game, maybe the most important question to ask is it actually scary? And my answer is definitely. It leans more towards atmospheric, creepy, and suspenseful, rather than relying on jump scares or any sort of scripted scares. It's genuinely very creepy, and numerous times I felt my skin crawling as a result of the game. Hell, I remember booting up the tutorial for the first time, and even knowing that the ghost was non-violent, I was still spooked the hell out. The game presents an interesting predicament as your goal becomes trying to find and interact with the ghost, but if you're not careful, the ghosts are also able to try and hunt you down as well. This game loop where you must search around for clues and then interact with the ghost can be a bit of a slow one, but it definitely begins to ramp up as the ghost begins to get angrier and angrier. This slow build-up really helps to build the suspense and tension, as the expectation of fear is what really gets you in this game. You know the ghost is around somewhere and is gonna hunt, but you have no idea when or where. I will say, however, that the ramp up can sometimes be really slow, and a lot of the time you'll be waiting around trying to get the ghost to respond to you. While there are some jump scare moments where the ghost might randomly appear next to you, with how the ghost works, you'll usually be able to tell roughly where the ghost might be, and so a jump scare moment should really never take you by too much of a surprise. You can't really sprint in this game, and it helps to contribute to a sense of helplessness, but it's also worth mentioning that you're actually able to run and hide from ghosts if needed. What really surprised me about the gameplay is the level of depth to the puzzle aspects, as well as the level of detail regarding the ghost type mechanics and tendencies. Especially at higher levels or on larger maps, you do need to have some preparation and systems worked out if you want to be as efficient as possible to find and test the ghost. Not only that, but I really like how all ghosts will be a little bit different in their characteristics, and as you slowly figure out more clues, it becomes important for you to be wary of the potential ghost types and prepare yourself for what they might be capable of. I think it's worth noting though that horror games can be a bit difficult to balance properly. As with horror games, once you figure out the mechanics, I think it naturally becomes less scary, which can sort of happen here. Even so, putting on a brave face might only last until someone decides to pay you a visit. I'll also add here that playing the game solo is far more terrifying of an experience versus playing in a group. The game also does a lot of really smart things to help bring the horror home, especially in the graphics and sound department. The game is just insanely dark a lot of the time, especially before you start unlocking more powerful flashlights and getting items to help illuminate the areas. A lot of the visuals help contribute to the sense of fear, as shadows will often trick your eyes and you'll come across a lot of unnerving things, like dead-eyed dolls, Ouija boards, and more. The character models and animations are pretty jank at times though, which to be honest is sort of expected with a solo developer game in Unity, but a lot of the ghost models are actually pretty great and can be terrifying when you see one up close suddenly. From the sound department, there's a lot of things the game does right. Of course, there's that deafening white noise that hits you the second you enter the building. It just gives this terrible sense of foreboding and is definitely a choice which works well for the game. Then throughout your hunt, you'll be constantly hearing footsteps, creaks, breathing, whispering, the sounds of radios, pianos, and other things off in the distance somewhere. These work brilliant to keep you on the edge of your seat the whole time. I think the voice chat features are brilliant for the game as well, but they can be a bit buggy at times. In the game, there's a local proximity chat as well as a radio chat. The local proximity chat supposedly is the main way to communicate with the ghost as well as anyone around you, although there are actually rumors that the ghost will hear whatever you say regardless of if you're using the push to talk button or not. The radio chat is done well as well, with some walkie-talkie effects applied to the voices. The big thing here that can be improved though is sometimes the proximity chat can be a bit weird. From distances it can sound fine, but once someone gets within a certain distance of you, the sound can suddenly flare up and get really loud, which can either hurt your ears or scare the bejesus out of you. If it's smoothed out a bit, I think it would be great. So recognizing that the game is still in early access, I wanted to bring up some minor issues I have and potential areas of improvement for the game. For one thing, I think the UI needs some massive improvements. It's really weird that you can't change any of your game settings once you get into a lobby, and I think maybe making the whiteboard UI a bit more intuitive would be helpful for new players, although it actually isn't terrible. I also think the controls can be incredibly jank sometimes and are probably the worst part of the Phasmophobia experience. It's pretty easy to mess up some of the items, and it's not always clear if I should be using the primary use versus the secondary use button, or the place versus the drop button. My next point is on the tutorial and learning the game. While I wouldn't say it's necessarily an issue, I do think that the game could perhaps use some more details, maybe added to the journal over time. The tutorial only gives you bare bones items and sort of makes you try and figure out how to operate the items, but these are often limited to a few basic ones. Don't get me wrong, I do like how the game forces you to learn, and I like that there is a sense of mystery around it. For example, there were rumors that in order to use the crucifix, you had to hold it and yell, "The power of Christ compels you!" But it turns out that's not actually the case. Maybe it would be helpful to unlock journal entries regarding some of the tools as you successfully use the objects. I think additional details in terms of how to earn money would also be helpful. Again, maybe after you complete the money-making objective one time, it unlocks some text which confirms that you did it correctly. It would also be nice for the game not to give us any optional objectives we can't complete. It's really annoying to get an objective which you aren't capable of completing simply because you didn't unlock or couldn't afford a certain item. The game, of course, being in early access has quite a few bugs which hopefully are going to be worked on. One of the biggest, of course, being where sometimes when you take photos, it doesn't properly register in the journal and you lose out on potential money. I think dead players should also be given something to do or some way to help, as otherwise it can be really boring if you're the first to die and you need to wait 30 minutes for your teammates to try and figure everything else out. Finally, I think the difficulty curve should be upped a bit. When first starting out, the game feels pretty hard, but once you start unlocking various items, the lower levels begin to feel really slow and maybe a bit too easy. This sort of leaves you in a weird space where you want to move past amateur difficulty, but unfortunately you might need to go through some slow hunts in order to get there. The ghosts sometimes can also just be a bit too passive. I've had ghosts which were so shy that after 30 minutes of yelling their name, they still weren't triggered and wouldn't come out, and by that point my teammates were already tired and ready to finish up. The difficulty definitely ramps up in intermediate and professional, but I think the game could definitely be made a bit more difficult or slightly quicker paced at times. Overall, I really have been loving this game and it's been my latest obsession. Even though it doesn't scare me as much as before, the game still always manages to find ways to make the hairs on my neck stand up. The game is definitely a bit jank, but I think the jank actually adds to the experience and helps to provide some humor, which I think is beneficial for a scary game. Again, the game is in early access, so I expect things to evolve and change a lot. I'm hoping the developer, D Knight, can add in some more interesting maps, more items, more ghost types, as well as fix some of the bugs which are plaguing the game right now. It'll be tough as he's a solo developer and apparently plans on keeping it that way, but he's definitely earned a fan out of me. If you're into horror at all, I definitely recommend you try out Phasmophobia. But hey, that's just me. If you've been playing Phasmophobia, please feel free to let me know any of your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. And if you made it this far, please do consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons as they really help my channel grow. I love talking about games and would love to have discussions on all sorts of topics. And as usual, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.